There is a distinct smell to corporate arrogance. It is a blend of dry-cleaned wool, stale espresso, and the sharp, metallic tang of expensive cologne. For 3 years, I breathed it in every time my boss walked onto the production floor. He was a man who believed the world was a chessboard, and the rest of us were merely pawns waiting to be sacrificed for his amusement. But the thing about pawns is that they only move one space at a time. They are quiet. They are patient. And if you ignore them long enough, they will eventually cross the board and tear your entire kingdom down. Vance was a regional director who wore his authority like a loaded weapon. He was the classic Type A personality, obsessed with control, micromanaging every drafting project, and deriving a sick thrill from keeping his subordinates in a constant state of anxiety. But his true ugliness did not lie in his management style. It lived in his extracurricular activities. Vance was a married man. His wife, Britta, was a senior executive in the logistics department, a sharp, striking platinum blonde who rarely visited our floor. Vance, however, treated his marriage vows as polite suggestions. He had a hobby. He fancied himself an amateur photographer, but his subjects were exclusively the women he manipulated into hotel rooms during his frequent business trips. Worse, he kept the evidence. I would watch from my cubicle, teeth grinding, as he huddled with the other middle managers by the loading dock, flashing glossy prints of his conquests. He would laugh, slide the photos back into his tailored jacket, and walk away with the swagger of an untouchable king. I kept my head down. I had a reason to endure the toxicity. Her name was Ondine. Ondine worked in our Denver branch as a supply chain coordinator. We had met at a corporate retreat 2 years prior, bonding over the absurdities of our shared industry. What started as friendly emails evolved into late-night phone calls, and soon, weekend flights across state lines. She was brilliant, pragmatic, and possessed a laugh that could cut through the thickest gloom. We kept our relationship quiet, a private sanctuary away from the gossiping machinery of the company. It was difficult, the distance stretching between us like a physical weight, but we had a plan. In 6 months, I would transfer to Colorado. Then Vance scheduled a compliance audit in Denver. I remember the phone call vividly. It was a Tuesday evening. The rain was lashing against my apartment window. When I picked up, Ondine was not crying, but her voice carried a ragged, furious edge that chilled my blood. Vance had taken the Denver team out for dinner. Afterward, he had cornered her in the hotel lobby, blocking her path to the elevators. He dropped his usual thinly veiled hints, escalating quickly into explicit demands. He told her how beneficial a private alliance with a regional director could be for her career. Ondine told him exactly where he could shove his alliance, loudly enough that the concierge looked up. She turned on her heel and left him standing there, his ego bruised in public. 3 days later, Ondine was terminated. The official paperwork cited a restructuring of regional assets, but we both knew the truth. Vance had fabricated a series of phantom compliance failures, burying her under a mountain of bureaucratic lies. He wielded his authority to sever her livelihood simply because she had bruised his fragile pride. When she told me, a hot, blinding rage threatened to swallow me whole. I wanted to march into his corner office, drag him over his mahogany desk, and make him feel a fraction of the powerlessness he had inflicted on the woman I loved. But Ondine talked me down. She reminded me that a sudden explosion of anger would only get me fired or worse, arrested. She packed up her apartment, found a new job in a different sector, and told me to stick to our plan. She was safe. She was moving on. I, however, could not simply move on. The anger did not dissipate, it merely cooled, hardening into a sharp, crystalline focus. Vance had drawn blood. Now I was going to drain him dry. I knew about the photos. I knew he would never risk keeping them at his sprawling suburban estate where Britta might stumble upon them. They had to be in the office. So I became the perfect employee. I volunteered for extra shifts. I took on the tedious overtime tasks that kept me in the building long after the fluorescent lights dimmed to half power. I watched his routines. I studied the cleaning crew's schedule. I waited. 4 months after Ondine was fired, my patience yielded fruit. It was a dreary Saturday morning in late October. The heating system was turned off for the weekend, leaving the office with a hollow, damp chill. I was hunched over a set of wide-format blueprints, ostensibly taking dimensions for a structural revision. Down the hall, the heavy hum of an industrial vacuum cleaner echoed against the linoleum. Maria, the weekend custodian, pushed her yellow cart past my desk. She was a sweet, overworked woman who always appreciated the donuts I occasionally left in the break room. She gave me a tired smile, unlocked the heavy glass door to Vance's corner office, and propped it open with a rubber wedge to let the cleaning chemicals air out. "I'm going down to accounting to finish the trash bins," she called out. "Just pull his door shut if you leave before I get back, okay?" "No problem, Maria," I replied, my voice perfectly level. The moment the rhythmic thud of her cart faded around the corner, I stood up. I grabbed my tape measure and a clipboard, walking casually toward the corner office. The air inside smelled of leather and lemon polish. My hands felt eerily steady. I did not rush. I stepped behind the massive desk and began pulling drawers. The top tiers held nothing but corporate letterheads, expensive pens, and mints. Then I reached the bottom right drawer. It was locked. I crouched down, running my fingers along the underside of the heavy wooden desk. Arrogant men always believe they are clever, but they are remarkably predictable. Near the inner rim, my fingertips brushed against a small strip of heavy-duty tape. I peeled it back, freeing a tiny brass key. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. Inside the drawer, tucked behind hanging files of old quarterly reports, was a thick manila folder. I pulled it out and flipped it open. There they were, a stack of photographs 4 inches thick. Dozens of glossy prints, Polaroids, and printed digital captures. It was a sickening archive of betrayal. I flipped through them rapidly, my stomach turning at the blatant disregard for basic human decency. But amidst the disgust, a cold thrill of victory washed over me. I took the entire stack, slipped the folder under my clipboard, locked the drawer, and replaced the key under the desk. I walked out, pulled the glass door shut until the latch clicked, and returned to my blueprints. 10 minutes later, I packed up my drafting tools, waved goodbye to Maria in the lobby, and walked out into the cold autumn air. The trap was set, now I just needed to trigger it. I did not act immediately. Vance was too comfortable. I needed him to be out of town, completely unreachable and incapable of running damage control. 3 weeks later, he announced a 4-day trip to the Chicago branch. He strutted through the office on Tuesday morning, boasting about the deep dish pizza and the scenery he planned to enjoy. By noon, he was on a flight to O'Hare. On my lunch break, I drove back to my apartment. I laid the stolen photographs out on my kitchen table. I didn't need the whole stack to destroy him, I just needed the right ammunition. I carefully selected 12 distinct images. Every single photo clearly showed Vance's face, undeniable and damning, in various hotel rooms with 4 different women. I chose these specific photos for one crucial reason. The women in the pictures all had raven dark or vibrant red hair. Britta, his wife, was a natural, radiant blonde. There would be no room for excuses. No, it's an old photo of us defense. The visual contrast was absolute. I placed the 12 photos into a heavy, unmarked envelope. I sealed it tightly. I did not use a stamp. Instead, I got back into my car and drove 20 miles east, crossing the bridge into the wealthy, manicured suburb where Vance and Britta lived. I parked 3 blocks away from their sprawling modern home. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with towering oaks and pristine sidewalks. I walked to the blue collection box sitting directly outside the local post office, the post office that serviced Vance's own zip code. I wanted the postmark to be local. I wanted Britta to think it came from a neighbor, a private investigator, or perhaps even one of the women. I dropped the heavy envelope into the slot. The metal flap clanged shut, echoing like a judge's gavel. I drove back to work, finished my shift, and went home to call Ondine. We talked for 3 hours that night, mostly about the future, the mountains in Colorado, and the life we were going to build. I slept better than I had in a year. Vance returned to the office on Friday morning. He looked exhausted but wore his trademark smug grin, clutching a massive iced coffee. He barely made it to his desk before his cell phone rang. I was sitting 30 feet away, reviewing a spreadsheet, but the silence that suddenly fell over the production floor was deafening. Vance's voice, usually a booming baritone, cracked into a high-pitched, desperate stammer. He stood up so fast his leather chair slammed into the glass wall behind him. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under a heat lamp. "Britta, wait, just listen. No, I don't know what you're looking at." Britta put the scissors down. He sprinted out of the office, abandoning his coffee, his briefcase, and his dignity. He didn't return on Monday or Tuesday. By Wednesday, the whispers had mutated into roaring office gossip. Britta had not just confronted him. She had locked him out of the estate, frozen their joint accounts, and hired the most vicious divorce attorney in the state. Because they both worked for the same parent company, and because her legal team threatened to subpoena the corporate servers for evidence of misuse of company funds during his trips, the executives forced Vance into an immediate, unceremonious resignation. He was escorted into the building after hours by security just to collect his personal items. I made sure to leave a fresh stack of blank drafting paper on his desk before he arrived. Just a little reminder of the work he left behind. It took a year for the divorce dust to settle, but the rumors confirmed that Britta's lawyer took him for absolutely everything. The house, the retirement accounts, the boat. He was left with a fraction of his former life, stripped of the power and the wealth he had used to terrorize people like Ondine. As for us, I secured my transfer to Denver 6 months later. I packed my life into a moving truck and drove west, leaving the toxic air of that corporate kingdom far behind. Ondine was waiting for me on the porch of a small rental house near the foothills. When I stepped out of the truck, she wrapped her arms around my neck, and that bright, cutting laugh of hers filled the crisp mountain air. Today, that woman is my wife. We have a dog, a modest mortgage, and a life built on mutual respect and genuine love. We don't talk about Vance anymore. We aren't angry. The bitterness has entirely washed away, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Sometimes people believe that karma is a mystical force, a cosmic balancing scale that magically right the wrongs of the world. But the truth is much simpler. Karma is often just a patient person, quietly watching from the corner of the room, waiting for the perfect moment to hand a tyrant the exact consequences they engineered for themselves. If you are dealing with someone who uses their power to crush others, do not let your anger blind you. Be quiet, be observant. Build your evidence, protect the people you love, and let the arrogant orchestrate their own downfall. If this story of patience, justice, and the ultimate payback resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you witnessed karma catch up to a toxic boss. Until next time, keep your head down, keep your eyes open, and always protect your peace.